Well, hello, Martin Road. Mr. Hahn back with you with another chapter of Where the Red Fern Grows. So we are now on to chapter 9. This is another long one. So without further ado, I want to make sure that we get right to the reading. So chapter 9 of Where the Red Fern Grows. By late evening, the happy tune I had been whistling was forgotten. My back throbbed like a stone bruise. The muscles in my legs and arms started quivering and jerking. I couldn't gulp enough air to cool the burning heat in my lungs. My strength was gone. I could go no further. I sat down and called my dogs to me. With tears in my eyes, I told them I just couldn't cut that big tree down. I was trying hard to make them understand when I heard someone coming up. It was Grandpa in his buggy. I'm sure no one in the world can understand a young boy like his grandfather can. He drove up with a twinkle in his eye and a smile on his old whiskery face. "Hello, how are you getting along?" he boomed. "Not so good, Grandpa," I said. "I don't think I can cut it down. It's just too big. I'm going to have to give up." "Give up?" Grandpa barked. "Now, I don't want to hear you say that. No, sir, that's the last thing I want to hear. Don't ever start anything you can't finish." "I don't want to give up, Grandpa, but it's just too big and my strength is gone. I'm give out." "Course you are. You've been going at it wrong. To do work like that, a fellow needs plenty of rest and food in his stomach." "How am I going to get that, Grandpa?" I asked. "I can't leave the tree. If I do, the coon will get away." "No, you won't," Grandpa said. "That's what I came down here for. I'll show you how to keep the coon up in that tree." He walked around the big sycamore. Looking up, he whistled and said, "Boy, this is a big one, all right." "Yes, it is, Grandpa. It's the biggest one in the river bottoms." Grandpa started chuckling. "That's all right," he said. "The bigger they are, the harder they fall." "How you make that coon stay in the tree, Grandpa?" I asked. With a proud look on his face, he said, "That's another one of my coon hunting tricks. Learned it when I was a boy. We'll keep him up there all right. And I don't mean we can keep him up there for always, but he'll stay for 4 or 5 days. That is, until he gets so hungry he just has to come down." "I don't need that much time," I said. "I'm pretty sure I can have it down by tomorrow night." Grandpa looked at the cut. "I don't know," he said. "Even though it's halfway down, you must remember you've been cutting it on half one day and one night. You might make it, but there's still a lot of chopping left to do." "If I can get a good night's sleep," I said, "and a couple of meals under my belt, I can do a lot of chopping." Grandpa laughed. "Speaking of meals," he said, "your ma's having chicken and dumplings for dinner. Now, we don't want to miss that, so let's get busy." "What do you want me to do first, Grandpa?" I asked. "Well, let's see," he said. "First thing we'll need is some sticks about 5 feet long. Take your axe, go to the canebrake, and get us 6 of them." I hurried to do just what Grandpa wanted, all the time wondering what in the world he was going to do. How could he keep the raccoon in the tree? When I came back, he was taking some old clothes from the buggy. "Take the stocking cap," he said, "fill about half full of grass and leaves." While I was doing this, Grandpa walked over and looked up the tree. "You're pretty sure he's in the hollow limb, are you?" he asked. He's there all right, Grandpa. There's no other place he could be. I looked it over and over, and there's no hollow anywhere." "Well, in that case," Grandpa said, "we better put our man along about here." "What man?" Grandpa asked in surprise. "The one we're going to make," he said. "To us it'll be a scarecrow, but to the raccoon it'll be a man." Knowing too well how smart coons were, right away I began to lose confidence. I don't see how anything like that can keep a coon in a tree. "It'll keep him there all right," Grandpa said. "Like I told you before, they're curious little devils. He'll poke his head out of that hole, see this man standing there, and he won't dare come down. It'll take him 4 or 5 days to figure out that isn't a real honest-to-goodness man. By that time it'll be too late. He'll have his hide tacked to the smokehouse wall." The more I thought about it, the more I believed it. And then there was a serious look on Grandpa's face. That's all it took, and I was firmly convinced. I started laughing. The more and more I thought about it, the funnier it got. Great big laughing tears rolled down my cheek. "What's so funny?" Grandpa asked. "Don't you believe it'll work?" "Sure it'll work," Grandpa said. "I know it will. I was just thinking, those coons aren't half as smart as they think they are they?" We both had a good laugh at that. With the sticks and some baling wire, Grandpa made a frame that looked almost like a gingerbread man. On this he put an old pair of pants and a red sweater. We stuffed the loose flabby clothes with grass and leaves. He wired the stocking cap hat in place and stepped down to inspect his work. "Well, what do you think of it?" he asked. "If he had a face, you couldn't tell it from a real man." "Well, we can fix that," Grandpa chuckled. He took a stick and dug some black grease from one of the hubcaps on the buggy. I stood and watched while he applied his artistic touch. In the stocking cap head he made two mean-looking eyes, a crooked nose, and the ugliest mouth I'd ever seen. "Well, what do you think of that?" he asked. "Looks pretty good, huh?" Laughing fit to kill and talking all the same, I told him I wouldn't blame the coon if he stayed in the tree till Gabriel blew his horn. "He won't stay that long," Grandpa chuckled. "But he'll stay long enough for you to cut that tree down." "That's all I want," I said. "We better get going," Grandpa said. "It's getting late and we don't want to miss that supper." I was so stiff and sore, he had to help me to the buggy seat. I called to my dogs. Little Ann came, but not willingly. Old Dan refused to leave. "Come on, boy," I coaxed. "Let's go home and get something to eat. We'll be back tomorrow." He bowed his head, looked the other way. "Come on," I scolded. "We can't sit there all night." His feelings were hurt. He walked around behind the big sycamore tree and hid. "Well, I'll be," Grandpa said as he jumped out from the buggy. "He knows the coon's there and he don't want to leave it. You get yourself a good coon hound there, and I mean a real good one." He picked old Dan up in his arms and set him in the buggy. All the way home, I had to hold onto his collar to keep him from jumping out and going back to the tree. As our buggy wound its way through the bottoms, Grandpa started talking. "You know, Billy, about this tree chopping, I think it's all right. In fact, I think it would be a good thing if all young boys had to cut down a big tree like that once in their lives. It does something for them. It gives them determination and willpower. It's a good thing for a man to have. It goes a long way. The American people have a lot of it. They prove that all down through history, but they could do with a lot more too." I couldn't see this determination and willpower that Grandpa was talking about very clearly. All I could see was a big sycamore tree, a lot of chopping, and the hide of a ring-tailed coon that I was determined to have. As we reached the house, Mama came out. Right away she started checking me over. "You all right?" she asked. "Sure, Mama. What makes you think there's something wrong with me?" "Well, I don't know," she said. "The way you acted when you got down from the buggy, I thought maybe you were hurt." "Ah, he's just a little sore and stiff from all the chopping," Grandpa said. "He'll be all right. That'll go away." After Mama saw there were no broken bones or legs chopped off, she smiled and said, "I never know anymore. I guess I'll just have to get used to it." Papa howled from the porch. "Come on in. We've been waiting supper on you." "We're having chicken and dumplings," Mama beamed, "and I cooked them especially for you." During the meal, I told Grandpa I didn't think that the coon in the big tree was the same one my dog said was trailing first. "What makes you think that?" he asked. I told how the coon had fooled us and how little Ann had seen or heard this other coon. I figured he just had walked up on my dogs before I realized it. A smile spread over my grandpa's face. Chuckling, he said, "It looks that way, but it wasn't. No, Billy, it was the same coon. They're much too smart to ever walk up on a hound like that. He pulled a trick and it was a good one. In fact, it'll fool 9 out of 10 dogs." "Well, what do you do, Grandpa? I'm pretty sure he didn't cross the river. How do you work it?" Grandpa pushed the dishes back and using his fork as a pencil, he drew an imaginary line on the tablecloth. "It's called the backtracking trick," he said, and here's how he worked it. He climbed that water oak, but he only went up about 15 or 20 feet. Then he turned around and came down in the same tracks. He backtracked on his original trail for a way. When he heard your dogs coming, he leapt far on the side of the nearest tree and climbed up. He was in that tree all the time your dogs were searching for the lost trail. And after everything had quieted down, he figured they'd given up. That's when he came down, and that's when little Ann either heard him or saw him. Pointing the fork at me, Grandpa said very seriously, "You mark my word, Billy, in no time that little Ann will know every trick a coon can pull. You know, Grandpa, she wouldn't bark treat at the water oak like old Dan did. Of course she wouldn't," he said. "She knew he wasn't there." I never heard of such a thing," Mama said. "I had no idea coons were that smart." "Well, for anyone knows, he might not be in that big tree at all. Maybe pull another trick. It would be a shame if Billy cut it down and found no coon in there." "Oh, he's there, Mama," I hastily replied. "I know he is. They were right on his tail when he went up. Besides, little Ann was bawling her head off when I came to them." "Of course he's there," Grandpa said. "They were crowding him too closely. He didn't have enough time to pull another trick." Grandpa left soon after supper, saying to me, "I'll be back down in a few days and I want to see that coon hide." I thanked him for helping me and walked out to the buggy with him. "Oh, I almost forgot," he said. "I heard there was a fad back in the New England states. Seems like everyone's going crazy over coonskin coats. Now, if this is true, I look for the price of a coon hide to take a jump." I was happy to hear this and told my father what Grandpa had said. Papa laughed and said, "Well, you can keep the coons out of those big sycamores, you might make a little money." Before I went to bed, Mama made me a hot bath. Then she rubbed me all over with some liniment, and that burned like fire and smelled like a cat. It seemed like I barely closed my eyes when Mama woke me up. "Breakfast is about ready, Billy," she said. I was so stiff and sore I had trouble putting my clothes on. Mama helped me. "Maybe you better let that coon go. I don't think it's worth all this." "I can't do that now, Mama. I've gone way too far." Papa came in from the barn. "What's the matter?" he asked. "You a little stiff?" "A little stiff," Mama exclaimed. "Why, he could hardly put his clothes on." "Ah, he'll be all right," Papa said. "If I know anything about swinging an axe, it won't be long before he's as limber as a rag." Mama just shook her head and started putting our breakfast on the table. While we were eating, Papa said, "You know, I woke up several times last night, and each time I was sure I heard a hound bawling. It sounded like old Dan." I quit the table on the run and headed for my doghouse. I didn't have to go all the way. Little Ann met me on the porch. I asked her where old Dan was and called his name. He was nowhere around. Little Ann started acting strangely. She whined and stared up the river bottoms. She ran out to the gate, came back, and reared up on me. Mom and Papa came up to the porch. "He's not here," he said. "I think he went back to the tree." "I don't think he'd do that, would he?" Mama said. "Maybe he's around someplace. Have you looked in the doghouse?" I ran and looked. He wasn't there. "Everybody be quiet and listen," I said. I walked out beyond the gate a little ways and whooped as loud as I could. My voice rang like a bell in the still, frosty morning. Before the echo had died, I heard the deep bawling of old Dan. "He's there," I said. "He wanted to make sure that coon stayed in that tree. You see, Mama, that's why I have to get that coon. I can't let him down." "Well, I never in all my life," she said, "had no idea a dog loved to hunt that much. Yes, Billy, I can see it now, and I want you to get him. I don't care if you have to cut down every tree in those bottoms. I want you to get that coon for those dogs." "I'm going to get him, Mom," I said, "and I'm going to get him today if I can." Papa laughed and said, "Looks like there wasn't any use in building that scarecrow. All you had to do was tell old Dan to stay and watch the tree." I left the house in a run. Now and then I would stop and whoop. Each time I was answered by the deep voice of old Dan. Little Ann ran ahead of me. By the time I reached the big tree, their voices were making the bottoms ring. When I came tearing out of the underbrush, old Dan threw a fit. He tried to climb the sycamore. He would back off, then bawling and running as fast as he could, he would claw his way far up the other side. Little Ann, not to be outdone, reared up and placed her small front paws on the smooth white bark. She told the ring-tailed coon that she knew he was there. After they quieted down, I called old Dan to me. "I'm proud of you, boy," I said. "It takes a good dog to stay with a tree all night. And there wasn't any need in you coming back. The coon wouldn't have gotten away. That's why we built the scarecrow." Little Ann came over and started rolling in the leaves. The way I was feeling toward her, I couldn't help even smile at her playful mood. "Of course you feel good," I said in an irritated voice. "That's no wonder. You had a good night's sleep in a nice warm doghouse, but old Dan didn't. He was lying there in the cold all by himself watching the tree. The way you're acting, I don't believe you care if we get the coon or not." I would have said more, but then I noticed something. I walked over for a better look. There, scratched deep in the soft leaves, were two little beds, one smaller than the other. Looking at little Ann, I read the answer in her warm gray eyes. Old Dan hadn't been alone when he had gone back to the tree. She too had gone along. There was no doubt in that early morning she had come home to get me. There was a lump in my throat. I said, "I'm sorry, little girl. I should have known better." The first half hour was torture. Each swing of the axe, my arms felt like they were being torn from their socket. I gritted my teeth and I kept hacking away. My body felt like it did the time my sister drove me down the hill in a barrel. As Papa had said, in a little while the warm heat from the hard work limbered me up. I remembered that what my father did when he was swinging an axe. At the completion of each swing, he always said, "Ha!" I tried it. Karam! Ha! I don't know if it helped me or not, but I was willing to try anything to get the job done. Several times before noon, I had to stop and rake my chips out of the way. I noticed that they weren't the big, even, solid chips like my father made when he was chopping. They were small, and they seemed to crumble and come out with pieces. Neither were the cuts neat and even. They were ragged and looked more like the work of beavers. I wasn't interested in any beautiful tree chopping. All I wanted was to get the big sycamore start popping. Along the middle of the afternoon, I felt a stirring in one of my hands. When I saw it was a blister, I almost cried. At first there was only one, then two. One after another, they rose up on my hands like little white marbles. They filled up and turned a pale pinkish color. When one would burst, it was all I could do to keep from screaming. I tore my handkerchief in half and wrapped my hands. This helped for a while, but when the cloth began to stick to the raw flesh, I knew it was the end. Crying my heart out, I called to my dogs, and I showed them my hands. I can't do it, I said. I've tried, but I just can't cut it down. I can't hold my axe any longer. Little Ann whined and started licking my sore hands. Old Dan seemed to understand. He showed his sympathy by nuzzling me with his head. Broken-hearted, I started for home. As I turned, from the corner of my eye I saw Grandpa Scarecrow. It seemed to be laughing at me. I looked over the big sycamore. It lacked so little being cut down. A small wedge of solid wood was all that was holding it up. I let my eyes follow the smooth white trunk to the huge spreading limbs. Sobbing, I said, "You think you won, but you haven't. Although I can't get the coon, neither can you live, 'cause I've cut off your breath of life." And after I thought, why kill the big tree and not accomplish anything? I began to feel bad. Kneeling down between my dogs, I cried and I prayed, "Please, God, please give me the strength to finish the job. I don't want to leave the big tree like that. Please let me finish." I was trying to rewrap my hands so I could go back to work when I heard a long, low droning sound. I stood up and looked around. I could still hear the noise, but I couldn't locate it. I looked up. High in the top of the tree, in the big sycamore, a breeze had started the limbs swaying. A shudder ran through the tree trunk. I looked over to my right at the big black gum tree. Not one limb was moving. On its branches, a few dead leaves hung silent and still. One dropped and lazily floated to the ground. Over to my left was a large hackleberry. I looked up, and it was as still as a fence post. Another gust of wind caught the top of the big tree. It started popping and snapping. I knew it was going to fall. Grabbing my dogs by their collars, I backed off to safety. I held my breath. The top of the big sycamore rocked and swayed. Then there was a loud crack that seemed to come from deep inside the heavy trunk. Fascinated, I stood and watched the giant of the bottoms. It seemed to be fighting so hard to keep standing. Several times I thought it would fall, but in a miraculous way, it would pull itself back into perfect balance. The wind itself seemed to be angry at the big tree's stubborn resistance. It growled and moaned, and it pushed harder against the wavering top. With one final grinding, creaking sigh, the big sycamore started down. It picked up momentum as the heavy weight of the overbalanced top dove for the ground. A small ash was smothered by its huge bulk. There was a lightning-like crack as the trunk snapped. In its downward plunge, those huge limbs stripped the branches from the smaller trees. A log-sized one knifed through the top of a river oak. Splinter limbs flew skyward and rained over the bottoms. With the cyclone roar, the big tree crashed to the ground, and then silent. Out of the broken, twisted, tangled mass streaked a brown, furry ball. I turned my dogs loose and started screaming at the top of my lungs, "Get him, Dan, get him!" In his eagerness, old Dan ran ahead into a bur oak tree. He sat down with his deep voice and the river bottoms that he'd been hurt. It was really little Ann that had caught the coon. I heard the ringtail squall when she grabbed him. Scared half to death, I snatched up a club and ran to help her. The coon was all over her. He climbed on her head, growling, slashing, ripping, tearing. Yelping in pain, she shook him off and streaked for the river. I thought surely she was going to get away. At the very edge of the river's bank, she caught him again. I was trying hard to get in a lick with my club, but I couldn't for fear of hitting little Ann. Through the tears of my eyes, I saw the red, blurry form of old Dan sail into the fight. He was a mad hound. His anger at the burk oak tree was taken out on the raccoon. They stretched old Rennie out between them and pinned him to the ground. It was savage and brutal. I could hear the dying squalls of the coon and the deep growls of old Dan. In a short time it was over. With sorrow in my heart, I stood and watched while my dogs worried the lifeless body. Little Ann was satisfied with it. I had to scold old Dan to make him stop. Carrying the coon by a hind leg, I walked over to the big tree for my axe. But before leaving for home, I stood and looked at the fallen sycamore. I should have felt proud over the job I had done, but for some reason I couldn't. I knew I would miss the giant of the bottoms, for it played a wonderful part in my life. I thought of the hours that I whiled away staring at its beauty, and how hard it had been finding the right name for it. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't want to cut you down, but I had to. I hope you understand. I was a proud boy as I walked along in the twilight of the evening. I felt so good, even my sore hand stopped hurting. Why wouldn't a boy have been proud? Hadn't my little hounds treed and killed the first coon? Along about then I decided I was a full-fledged coon hunter. Near our house I saw the whole family come out on the porch. My sisters were running, staring wide-eyed at the dead coon. Laughing, Papa said, "Well, I see you got him." "I sure did, Papa," I said. I held up the coon for all to see. Mama took one look at its lifeless body and winced. "Billy," she said, "when I heard that big tree fall, it scared me half to death. I didn't know if it had fallen on you." "No, Mama," I said. "I was safe. Well, I backed off way to one side. It couldn't have fallen on me." Mom just shook her head. "I don't know," she said. "Sometimes I wonder if all mothers have to go through this." "Come on," Papa said. "I'll help you skin it." While we were tacking the hide on a smokehouse wall, I asked if Papa noticed any wind blowing that evening. He thought for a bit, said, "No, I don't believe I did. I've been out here all day and I'm pretty sure I haven't noticed any wind. Why do you ask?" "Oh, I don't know, Papa," I said. "But I thought something strange happened in the bottoms this afternoon." "What do you mean, something strange?" Papa said. I told him how my hands had gotten so sore I couldn't chop anymore, how I asked for strength to finish the job. "What's so strange about that?" he asked. "I don't know, but I didn't chop the big tree down. The wind blew it over." "That's nothing. I've seen it happen a lot of times." "It wasn't just the wind," I said. "The way it blew. I didn't touch another tree in the bottoms. I know because I looked around. The big tree was the only one touched by the wind. Do you think my prayers were answered?" Papa looked around and scratched his head. He said, "I don't know, Billy. I'm afraid I can't answer that. But you must remember, the big sycamore was the tallest tree in the bottoms. Maybe there was a high current to catch the wind where the others couldn't. I can't help you there. You have to decide for yourself." It wasn't hard for me to decide. I was firmly convinced I had been helped. All right, everybody. We're already done with Chapter 9. Tomorrow we'll bring Chapter 10, done through 90 pages. Book is 212, so in a couple days we'll be halfway there. All right, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Kind of cool, kind of being able to reach out to you guys this way. So, with that being said, we'll see you tomorrow, Martin Road. Goodbye.